What's on the shelf? Rig rundown. Every few weeks or so, I'll pull a car off the shelf. We'll go over some of its features and some of its history. Each one of these cars has its own story to tell, so stay tuned for more videos.
What's on the shelf? Rig Rundown, episode 10. This is the final episode of Rig Rundown. We may do a different version of it. The point of Rig Rundown was to go over the stories and the cars that I had that were vintage, all of them having a personal connection and a story. This car is no different. It's another Lynx too. I know we've went over Lynxes in past videos. If you hadn't seen them, check them out. But this one's different. When we get the body off, we'll see. First off, this is a 90 or 91 Andes narrow Chevy Lumina body. It's got a traditional paint job that Mr. Greg Blankenship would run. First off, details are the body is screwed on with 440 cap head screws. We would run these. Some guys thought they were sensitive enough to feel an aero difference or aero advantage to screwing the body on. And just the fact that the body was tighter to the car versus being slightly, if you drilled your holes a little big on a typical post with pins, the body may rattle. A lot of things that people thought this was an advantage to screw the body on. It's a cleaner look, if that means anything. But anyway, we'll get this body peeled off here, and as soon as I get the right wrench. Hold on just a minute. We're going to leave that little faux pas in here because I thought this was 440, but the car's actually got 3mm screws, which takes a 2mm wrench. Must have had an abundance of 3mm button head screws. Now this car was built with new parts in, I believe it was around 2018 or 2019. Super rare parts. This is a complete ground effects from top to bottom. The rear pod, upper body mount, chassis, bumper mount, everything is true to the ground effects car. Let's bring the camera over here. We'll get a better look. All right, here we go. This is the ground effects super speedway car. Now, first thing you'll notice is this how wide this chassis is. This was not sold as a kit. You had to buy all this separate to build your car around it. The chassis, the bumper, this upper kind of a batwing type design body mount did come with the SS car, and you had this optional rear lower pod with a kick up and a spur gear protector kind of built into it. Back in the day, we would take a piece of Lexan and we'd fold it and make a diffuser, whether or not it was doing anything. This car had built-in Nerf wings. You know, most pan cars, the Nerf wing is bolted on. It was good and bad. I mean, this body, the whole premise of this chassis was to come out to the body, and you could seal the bottom off with clear tape. I even seen a guy at our local track back in the day would take it and take monocoat, wing coating for airplanes, and just monocoat his whole car and just cut out where the batteries needed to be and just have a complete slick bottom, and it was easily replaceable because it was just peel off, and that was the wrap of the day back in the day. It was a heat shrink. If you're familiar with model airplanes, it's a heat shrink coating that covers wings. I did a car like that once or twice, and that felt funny to me. It felt like it was floating, like it wasn't. I don't know, it just felt like it was getting too much air underneath it. Anyway, it does have the optional split beam. These are drilled 2 degrees. You can run them opposite. When you're oval racing, you want positive and negative camber. You got infinite caster adjustment because you just loosen this front screw and roll your caster back or forward, however you need it. They did later on come out with a fully adjustable front end that had a standoff here, and it run a link over to the upper kingpin, and then they actually machined that kingpin to where it would swivel, and you could adjust. You'd have infinite camber adjustment. It was kind of a clunky looking front end. It was neat. I believe one of the machinists at our track was one of the first ones that may have done it. And then TRC started offering it as a kit. I know BME come out with a kit that they just threaded the halves, and they run a link at a pretty sharp angle. I had one on a wide car. The bumper and the bumper mount were separate, and it made a flush finish. Like I say, when you coat the bottom of that car with Lexan or tape or the Monocoat, it would just be a complete sheet and nothing protruding for aero. This car has the optional inline axles. To run an inline axle with these big kingpins that the Lynx ran, they're 3/16, I believe. Typical pan car is 1/8 inch. And in order to do that, they had to make the stub axle kind of big, and it's aluminum. That's why you run the large diff nut as a front wheel nut. These things were kind of fragile because they had to machine it so thin to fit around the kingpin. There wasn't a lot of material left. But this is the on-center. Your standard Lynx steering blocks are trailing. They have the kingpin and then the arm. So this is the on-center steering block. Getting past the steering block, we get to this. Now this is not something I've never seen that was available retail. This was found in this part slot, and it's got a receiver mount or a transponder mount. I know back in the day with transponders had a body pin, so you'd have to drill a hole if you're going to run a transponder in this. I'm not sure what that was for. It just naturally seems like it would be for a receiver mount. If you're going to do like an insane speed run, you could fill this whole chassis full of batteries. It does have the optional Trinity purple shock. I believe the SS car back in the day did come with this shock, but it was an option for the Lynx. Most of us run a Kyosho Gold before they started offering this purple shock as a replacement of the Delta. Molded blue parts, another thing that's pretty rare. They started introducing, they had blue, green, neon yellow, and hot pink. These are molded. It's like a composite type plastic, really tough plastic for back in the day. It wasn't your typical nylon that was really flexible, and it wasn't very brittle. I've never broke one of these things. I've never broke one of these arms. Still a very unique suspension design even today. There's monoball cars, there's V-plate, T-plates, link cars, and there's not really ever been a floating A-arm type car. And this car worked really good outside. It might have been what it was designed for originally, because a lot of the concrete tracks back in the early 90s weren't exactly perfectly smooth. Again, with the motor, well, it's not a motor mount, but it could be used as a motor mount. The left pod plate also molded in blue, and the rear sway bar mounts molded in blue. And you could personalize your car, like the neon mounts, these body mounts, they're normally white. You could get them in colors, and you could get little eyelets. Your adjustment eyelets. If you didn't screw your body on, you use pins, you could use the eyelets to adjust your body height. It has blue bearing carriers, and you can't really see them in the camera. They, there we go. They came in all different colors also. There's the odd square hub that was used on the left side to make the car narrow. It brought the hub in as far as it could, and then the TRC Pro 10 or Bowlink Eliminator right side hub. Didn't change the axle, because if you remember on a Lynx 2 standard, the axle is kind of you gotta like have a deep 12 socket to get to it, because the axle length is the same. They just made the hub longer, and it's still got the stubby axle, so you had to get a wrench down in it to get adjust the diff. Trinity Magic spur gear, 64 pitch. It is a narrow spur gear for efficiency, and it has a little cup or a ring around the diff that houses the diff ring and the balls, and it protects them somewhat, keeps the grease inside, keeps the rocks out to a certain extent. East Coast Motors. It is a 27 turn stock motor. This motor has never been run, never been soldered. That is probably the Viper motor. It's a Yokomo can. I'm guessing that's about 92. That was in this lot. TRC radials. This is the second edition of the radials. The first one's come out with BBS wheels. This is the stock car wheel. This is my favorite wheel they ever did, although it's pretty flexible. And like I said, if you watch some of the older videos, they did re-release this wheel in a black composite, and it got quite a bit stiffer before they come out with the ZR1 wheel, and the ZR1 wheel eliminated all the flex, and the ZR1 wheel came out with the full wraparound radial. These tires are literally a band on a foam tire, and then they would recommend you taking CA glue and CA in your sidewall. You can see the thickness of the rubber. The pro guys were running these tires for 4 minutes, and then they put a new set on. And we weren't pros. We couldn't afford that because these tires were still $20 a piece in 1990. And we would run them as long as we could. These are gold. That's a medium compound. We run 3 golds and a silver. And we run 4 golds. They did come out later on with a cambered tire that was slightly smaller. Or not cambered, but you could run stagger. It was a slightly smaller left side tire. And you could play with stagger a little bit. But that's pretty much the car. It does have the optional TRC pod dampener. A lot like the Associated car, they had that center disc. They had the you put diff grease in it, and it would dampen your side to side. This mounted on top of the pivot ball, and it has 2 rings with Teflon tape on it with a spring, and you can adjust the tension on that spring to compress that plate together, and that would give you some dampening. I wasn't a big fan of this system because the more you got it tight, the less suspension action you would get because you were binding suspension up, in my opinion. I like the old bone-length swizzle stick, so I would run mine from here to here. If you run it from here down to the base, it seemed like it would interfere also with the suspension travel. But at least it would send more weight to one side, so we would run it from here to here across the top, and it wouldn't affect the pod movement at all. And it would definitely dampen. Because this right here is a spring. You know, it's a spring steel or it's music wire. I believe this might be 093. It's kind of big. Most of the cars come with 078, and obviously stiffer or thicker diameter music wire, you're going to have a stiffer side-to-side action, and the car would be a little more free, and also a little more stiff over bumps if you had a bumpy surface. On carpet, we always run the heaviest sway bar we could get. But even back then, the carpet tracks were banked. So this car worked really well there. It wasn't as crazy offset as the cars are today. And that's mainly the geometry difference between now and then is the offset on the new cars are so far left. Everything's shoved to the left. And those cars didn't perform as well on the concrete as these did once we got the track going again. Let's go to the story. This is Greg Blankenship's signature paint job, his number 31. He called me one day, and we had somebody had told him about some parts that some guy randomly just got a load of RC stuff, and it just so happened to be there's a lot of composite craft stuff in the box. And in that box, we found all kinds of these colored parts. This chassis, of course, he got dibs on it. He was there first. He was there. It's about 10 minutes from his house, and it's about 3 hours from my house. And I was the first person he called to come in and get some of it. And we'll back y'all up a little bit. Like I said, he was the first one to get to the parts. I think his daughter knew somebody that knew somebody, and it just kind of happened. Never would have suspected it when we found it. It was a house in a basement, and some young guy didn't know what it was. We gave him fair prices for everything. We bought him out. We bought everything he had. Me and Greg split it up. That was an adventure. That was pretty cool. Who would expect to see all the cool original TRC stuff in a random house in West Virginia? But But this car I built for him with those new parts. I think I inspired him a little bit to start a little vintage collection, because at that time I had like 70 or 80 cars. My collection has narrowed down quite a bit since then. But I told him if he ever was to get rid of this car, to let me know. I would give him a fair price, or I'll give him whatever he wanted for it, because what are the odds of getting another one with all new parts? Well, let's fast forward till 2021. His health has always been up and down. I don't know if he felt a certain way or what, but his health was declining at that time pretty rapidly. This is right around Christmas of 21. And he had a deal going with another guy that's in one of our vintage groups. And he kept asking me, what's the car worth? I said, don't take no less than this or that. And I said, if you need money, I'll buy it. Oh, and he started feeling bad, and he called me to the house about a week after Christmas. And he handed me the car. He's like, here, just take it, because I'm too tempted to sell it. I told you I wanted to put this in my will. And before he had a chance to put it in his will, he's like, just take it. Go home with it. Merry Christmas. And this car's been in the collection ever since. It's not going anywhere as long as I'm healthy and wealthy and wise. Well, I'm not wealthy. But anyways, it was interesting the struggle he was having to not sell the car. And I had no problem with him selling the car as long as he got a fair price. And but I was going to meet the price if that was the case. And so anyways, I ended up getting the car. He gave it to me. And that was in December, January. It was probably right around New Year's of 21, 22. Or Christmas of 21 and 22. And then we tried. I mean, we talked racing. That's all we talked about all the time. He was a big sports fan. I never was really a big sports fan. So he and I, what we had in common was RC racing, NASCAR stuff. And he was always just like, they moved here to race at King. I mean, I believe that was his motivation to even move here. We did that charity race, fundraising race to help him move down here, because he was going through some health issues at that time. And getting him down here and getting the proper care gave him some pretty good quality of life. After that, in 2019. But let's fast forward 2022. We're going into the new year, talking about racing. He wants to team up. We got past COVID at that point. I mean, we're still around now, but the heat of it, everything was opening back up. We're going racing. He wants to build a couple of cars. We want to make a team. He wants us to run same paint schemes. He was all excited, and he was determined, but his health just kept beating him down. Every time we turn around, he'd take 2 steps forward and falls 3 steps back. Up until, I think he had some more issues, another stay in the hospital around February. And then in March, I got a video. I'm going to post that at the end of this. We got our 2 cars built. I got them painted up. We're going racing. Thunder Motorsports is going to be a thing. And got into the track for a practice day. He wasn't doing really well. And he tried. And he got to drive his car. I do have a quick little video of that. And that was the last time he got to race. We didn't get to race that day. But he got to drive his car. All right. Anyway, that was the last time he got to drive his car. Unfortunately, he never got well enough to come back to the track. And by May, it had taken the turn, and he had passed away. We did have a good memorial race for him. This guy was a grown-up kid. It's just a toy car and all that. But it was so much more than just a toy car. It was pretty much a lifestyle. That's what we had as a connection. We first met when I first started cleaning up King. And he picked on me. He said he was stalking me on Facebook. And he followed me. He'd come down here and he would just walk around the track. And that is the only YouTube video. He's got his own channel, but this is the only YouTube video he ever made where he spoke. And I got a little clip of that, and we'll throw it in here also. So, anyway, that's the story. It's hard to talk about it still. But we're going to wrap this up. Episode 10, What's on the Shelf? Rig Rundown. Greg Thunder Blankenship. Links to Ground Effects. Andy's Pontiac PRC TM Radials. Version 2. And appreciate everybody watching. Hit that subscribe button. We are inching towards that 1,000. I think we're right at 700 now. So, yeah, this is just a lot of blabbing. So some of y'all may appreciate it. Feel like it had to be done. And that's a wrap for a Reader's Rundown or Rig Rundown. And catch up with us later. We'll do something. We'll do something with another rundown, but it won't be the traditional shelf rig rundown. We'll do something different. Anyways, appreciate it. Thanks. Hit subscribe, like, thumbs up, hit the bell, all that good stuff, and we'll see you next time.
The track feels pretty smooth. There are a few cracks, but it's not as you would think throughout the years not being used. They've already ran a couple of tank cars and they were pretty smooth. And it's just going to be a matter of time of just some more work and some more just good attention on this surface, which is really good. I'm on, you can see these guys work your tail off. Big kudos to Greg Cummings. He's really worked to get this track back, or at least get it open for now, and time will tell until we'll see what happens. The building is amazingly in excellent condition. Just needs to be refloored at the top. Some of it's rotten, but it still can be used. As far as the building, that's looks like out of the question. You can see this guy sells aluminum buildings and structures, so this is a lot of work. This guy's put a lot of work in it. We made the 2-hour drive just to have a sight, just to see this. Wanted to see it brought back.
I wanted to pop back in here right quick. Hope you like those little clips at the end. I feel like I cut this a little short. I could go on and on with stories. We had a lot of history and endless stories about racing and RC cars and a lot of adventures that we didn't get to do. So live your life to the fullest, folks. Enjoy every day you got here. Enjoy the time with your friends.